Let's talk about creating some morphing presets. I don't mean a preset that has a single sound that changes tone, color, or spectral content in some way. We want to create two or more different sounds in the matrix and then smoothly morph or transition between them in some way, typically using Y, Z, or even X. We can also use a shape generator to automatically morph between the sounds. And finally, if you have a 3 DSP continuum, you can even load up two presets and program them to morph between each other in different ways. We'll have examples of all of that in this video. So first, let's create two different sounds. You can do this in a number of different ways. You can have two oscillators that are set to two different sounds, or maybe one oscillator and a multiplier. You can use a bit bank or a bit graph, a sine bank, a harman, a modman. Lots of different ways that you can create two separate sounds in the EaganMatrix. So let's start off with a simple example. We'll use two wave banks. One of them will create a sawtooth wave bank, the other we'll use as a square. One thing to remember about wave banks is that if you use two wave banks and a voice delay, you can't have two separate sounds on these wave banks. Let's start with the simplest case. We'll use pressure as the amplitude control of the wave bank, and we'll use X as the first frequency in each of the two cases. Now, I'll just output them both with the standard Z pressure function, and this will play them both at the same time. They're both set to the same frequency. I'm only using one harmonic. Let's morph between these sounds now on Y. We'll create a formula. We'll have Y starting at 0 and moving to full in one case. And we'll take another formula, we'll do the opposite. We'll start at full amplitude and tail off to nothing at the end. We'll put A as the amplitude control of the sawbank. We'll put B as the amplitude control of the square. As I press the bottom of Y, the square wave will come out, and as I go to top of Y, the square wave will tail off. As I press the bottom of Y to top, the sawtooth wave will come in. Let's see what happens now. I'll press bottom of Y. There's my square, and I'll go up to top. The sawtooth is coming in, and at the top I'm totally sawtooth. And of course I can press the fingerboard in various places on Y. And get a combination of those two sounds. Now I don't have to do this in a linear fashion, so I can use different shapes for my transition, and maybe I'll change it to this pattern. On the other one, I could keep it linear, or I could do the similar thing on that, and my transition will be a little different. That's a little smoother than the linear one, but you can play around and change shapes. You don't have to have them do the same thing. You could use a step function, but in that case, of course, it wouldn't be as smooth, but still possible. Have a step on one, we'll have a step on the other. There you can see I'm using different step patterns. That's not a smooth transition anymore, but it might be effective in certain cases. You can do the same thing on Z. Let's get rid of our Y formulas, and we'll do something similar on Z. In the sawtooth case, we'll have Z come in and tail off, and in the second case, we'll have Z start at 0 and go up. Now, Y is not going to affect the morph, but as I press harder, the square wave will come out the deeper I press. There, pressing softly, I hear the sawtooth wave, and as I press harder, the square comes out. And of course, somewhere in the middle, they're both playing. Of course, if you're playing polyphonically, you really can't control exactly where pressure is on each finger in relation to the morph, and so you're going to get some kind of nice combination of sounds coming out now. So using Y and Z is very easy in a lot of cases to morph between two sounds. What about X? Now, we're applying an X formula on the amplitude. We're not using it for frequency. Those I've already set up using the standard X formula. So the normal X function for frequency would be this, but I can change this to be a linear pattern and tail off X to 0 in that fashion. And let me put that, and let's go to A. We'll do a similar thing, make this linear, and we'll do this so that X starts at 0 and moves up. And so now basically the square wave should be playing at the bottom of the fingerboard, and as I move up, the sound will tail off. And of course, the sawtooth will come in as I do that. There I can hear more of a square down here, and more of a sawtooth wave up top. This perhaps is less useful than the Y and Z options. I could play around with this a little bit. For example, on the square wave, maybe I want that to cut out a little lower on X. I can move my cutout point over. On the sawtooth, maybe I want that to start coming in a little bit higher on X and come in a little faster. So you can play around with these two formulas. They can obviously be different shapes on each of the morphing patterns. And now, there I can hear the square, and the sawtooth is taking over lower on the fingerboard. That creates a very nice morph between the two using X. Let's increase the complexity of this morph. I've created a preset here based on what we just did, only now I've added a lot more harmonic complexity to the wave banks by changing the frequencies of each of the 5 possible settings. We'll keep the original fundamental on the first frequency, and on the saw bank I'll set one of the frequencies down an octave and another frequency down 2 octaves. The other 2 frequencies I'll set to 1.5 times X and a formula that will set the remaining frequency to 2.5 times X. So I'm going to get a very complex sound, a very organ-like kind of a sound with different partials out of this sawtooth bank. I'll do something similar on the square wave. So in this case, I'll have the fundamental frequency and then have one set up an octave higher, and then 4 times, 8 times octave settings on my fundamental, and I'll throw in a 3 times X as well for a little more harmonic complexity. So I'm going to have a low sound that I'll have on the bottom of my morph and a high sound on the top. Now, so that I don't overwhelm myself with sound, what I did was use a V formula that doesn't go to unity on the amplitude. And I can adjust this to be a little lower or higher if I find the overall output needs to be adjusted. Now the morph in this case, I'm going to create on the outputs. I'm not going to actually do it on the amplitude for the wave banks themselves. In a lot of cases you can get a smoother morph this way. And also, some components like oscillators, you can't set the amplitude directly of those, so you have no choice but to set amplitudes on the output. In this case, I created 2 formulas. So on the sawtooth bank, or A bank, we have a formula that at the bottom of Y, amplitude is 1, and that will tail off as you go to the top of Y. So my low sound is going to be on the bottom of Y, decreasing until I get to the top. And on the square bank, I will not come in at the bottom of Y. I'll increase till I get to the top of Y. So the high sound will cut in at the top of Y. I've also added some echo to this preset to give it a little more punch, and let's see what this will sound like. So at bottom of Y, we have the low sound. The high kicks in as I go to the top of Y. And at the very top of Y, I'm only playing basically that higher of the two morphing sounds. And you can play around with the shape of your morph on Y the way we did before, or if you like, you can morph this on Z like we did before as well. Now, I don't have to have quite so different a morph. If I wanted to, I could set the wave banks to the same sound. Here I set both to a triangle, and I've altered the harmonic content of them to be different. But in this case, what I'm going to do is, instead of morphing on Y or Z, I'm going to do it automatically based on a shape generator. I'll create two shape generators. I'll set them to the same frequency to start, and I'll set them to a triangle shape to start. So my first formula, I'm going to set the shape generator 1 as a triangle shape. My second formula, I'll set to shape generator 2, triangle, but on this one, I'll set the phase off 180 degrees to give me a little bit of cutting in and out of these two different sounds. I've also added an oscillator, which I've disabled for now, that I can add in there as a constant sound if I find that the two morphs are creating a discontinuity. One way to solve that problem is to throw in another sound at a constant lower amplitude that'll smooth things out more. Well, what does this sound like without that smoothing oscillator on it? I can hear it cutting in and out. It's not as different sounding because they have the same waveform set. You can hear that morphing, and I can do a lot of different things here. If I want, I don't have to use a triangle shape. I could use another shape, maybe one on a Han, another on a triangle. There I can hear it. Things are getting more silent in some places and not in others. What I could do to solve some of this is, if I go back to my triangle, maybe I want to offset them not 180 degrees, but something like 270. I can also make the frequencies of them a little different, so they're not going to phase in and out together. As much. I can cut in my evening oscillator. You can hear that constant oscillator at a low value in the background will even out my morph. And of course, if I wanted to make it different, I can change the banks to different sounds again. I think you get the idea. You can play around with these shape generators in a number of different ways. That's how you can create some simple morphing between two presets. One thing that you might notice is I'm using the newer editor for this set of videos. I've started to do this because I can increase the scale of the screen, which makes it easier to see. Also, I think it'll be better as we move forward creating these videos to have them using the new editor layout. For the most part, this does exactly what the old 9.0 and previous editor did. It's just that you'll notice Instead of having all the controls on one screen together, Ed now has the ability to select different control panels that separate out some of the features. This has no effect on what we're discussing here. Same matrix as what is in 9.0. So all the things that I've talked about that use this new editor format, they apply equally as well to 9.0 that most people are running. There's one remaining thing you can do if you have a 3 DSP continuum. This is either a 3x, 4x, 5x, or 6x continuum. All slim continuums are 6x now. This morphing technique involves setting up 2 presets with a combination preset and using the same techniques we just talked about to morph between them. Well, let's say I want to create a morph between the violin, violoncello, bass 2 preset and the woodwind preset. What I need to do is get those 2 together so I can create a combination on them. What I'll do is I'll take 2 presets that I don't care about right now, say Django Bone and Marlon Perkins 1. I'll select my violin, viola preset, and I'll control click that into the first position, and let me select the woodwind and I'll control click that into the Marlon Perkins preset. And now what I'll do is I will alter these slightly. I'll go in and I notice there is no multiplier used in this preset, which is nice because I'm going to use that to morph. In the woodwind preset, there's no multiplier as well. So what I'll do is I will take my violin, viola, cello, bass preset, I'll create a formula, I'll put that as a multiplier, and I'll do what we did before. At the bottom of Y, I will bring things in at unity, so the string preset will play in the bottom of Y, and as I move to the top of Y, that will fade out. What I'll do is I'll control click this back in so that when I move to the next preset, it's stored. Now I'll go to the woodwind preset and I'll do the opposite with another formula. I'll put a multiplier formula on that, and I will do the opposite. At bottom of Y, the woodwind is not playing and it'll come in to unity at the top of Y, and I will control click that to keep that in place. Now I will go in and I will select my split that has combination presets. I want to play both presets together. In the newer editor, this is both presets use finger data. There's a similar setting for the 9.0 combinations, though please note that combination presets are changing as Ed and Lippold decide to add more features to them. So now I will set my combination on the string preset, and in the new editor the combinations are highlighted. The one that you're selecting to edit is in red, and the other one, or ones if you have a triple combination, are in blue. You just noticed there was a message that streamed across saying to reduce polyphony. When I use these combination presets, it's quite common that you may have to reduce polyphony. So what I'll go in here is, instead of saying bass 4, I'll set that to bass 3, and I should be okay now. And these 2 presets are set to play together. However, I've morphed them with Y so that one will come in on the bottom, the string, and fade to the top, and the reverse for the other. There's my string at the bottom. There's woodwind at top. And in the middle, I can kind of hear them both. I can do the same thing with Z here. I could do shape generator controlling of these 2 presets too as you play. Same techniques. So there you go. There are more complex things that can be done to morph. But to start out, why don't you just try some of these techniques? Try creating 2 separate sounds, can be anything you like, and use the techniques we talked about to try and morph between them.